Hold on to your wallets, folks, because what I'm about to tell you is going to make your head spin faster than Josh Allen scrambling away from a blitz. We've got accusations flying. We've got conspiracy theories spreading like wildfire across social media. We've got millions of dollars allegedly stolen from unsuspecting bettors. And at the center of it all, we've got the Buffalo Bills, DraftKings Sportsbook, and a Thursday night football game against the Houston Texans that has left the entire sports betting world asking one simple question. What in the absolute hell just happened? This isn't just your typical sports controversy where a team loses and fans get upset. This isn't just another case of bettors losing money and looking for someone to blame. This is a full-blown investigation into whether one of the most popular teams in the National Football League conspired with one of the biggest sports betting companies in America to deliberately lose a football game and defraud millions of people out of their hard-earned money. If even half of what's being alleged is true, we're looking at the biggest scandal in sports betting history. If it's not true, we're witnessing the most spectacular display of incompetence and terrible decision-making that the NFL has seen in years. Let me set the stage for you, because the numbers alone should make your jaw drop. The Buffalo Bills were playing the Houston Texans on Thursday Night Football. On paper, this game looked like a mismatch. The Bills were the favorite. Josh Allen, their superstar quarterback who had just thrown 6 touchdowns the previous week, was riding high. The Bills were rolling. Everything pointed to an easy Buffalo victory, and the betting public ate it up like it was Thanksgiving dinner. Look at these numbers and try not to gasp. On the money line, where you're simply betting on who wins the game, the Bills had 93% of the bets and 95% of the money. Let that sink in for a second. 95% of all the money wagered on that game was on Buffalo to win straight up. That's not just a popular bet. That's practically the entire betting public putting their faith and their cash on one team. On the point spread, where Buffalo was favored by 5.5 points, 76% of the bets and 78% of the money was on the Bills to cover. The betting public wasn't just leaning toward Buffalo. They were doing a full swan dive into Bills territory with their eyes closed and their wallets open. Now here's where things start to get really interesting, and by interesting I mean deeply suspicious to anyone paying attention. DraftKings Sportsbook, one of the biggest players in the sports betting industry, didn't just sit back and let people make their bets. Oh no, they actively promoted betting on the Bills. They pushed it, they marketed it. They practically begged people to throw their money on Buffalo. Check out this promotion they ran. Big bet alert. A bettor placed $60,000 on the Bills versus the Texans on Thursday Night Football. Possible payout $110,000. They're literally advertising someone else's massive bet to encourage more people to follow suit. They're creating FOMO, fear of missing out, making people think if someone is confident enough to drop 60 grand on the Bills, maybe they should jump on board too. But wait, it gets better or worse depending on your perspective. DraftKings partner, Bleacher Report Betting, jumped into the action with this gem. Everyone's on the Bills. Right move. They're literally telling you that the entire world is betting Buffalo and that you should too. They're showing graphics of all the money spread on the Bills. They're creating a narrative that this is the obvious play, the smart money, the bet you absolutely cannot afford to miss. This isn't subtle marketing. This is a full-court press to get as many people as possible to bet on Buffalo. And they weren't alone. Barstool Sports, another major player in the sports media and betting world, piled on with this promotional push. Josh Allen is a perfect 8-0 on Thursdays. The Bills are a 5.5-point favorite tonight versus the Texans. They're highlighting Allen's perfect record on Thursday nights, making it seem like betting against him would be financial suicide. They're building up the narrative that this is a lock, a sure thing, the easiest money you'll ever make. Every major betting outlet and sports media company seem to be singing from the same hymn book, all pushing the same message. Bet the Bills. Bet them heavy. Bet them with confidence. This is free money. But smart bettors, the ones who've been around long enough to recognize a trap when they see one, started raising red flags before the game even kicked off. One sharp bettor posted this warning on social media: "Take the Texans at +6. I've never seen a more obvious trap." This person recognized what was happening. When everyone in the world is on one side of a bet, when every media outlet is pushing the same narrative, when the betting percentages are that lopsided, professional gamblers know something is wrong. The house doesn't lose 95% of the time. Sportsbooks don't stay in business by letting the public hammer them on obvious favorites. When something looks too good to be true, when everyone agrees on the same outcome, that's usually when the opposite happens. And boy, oh boy, did the opposite happen. The Bills didn't just lose to the Texans. They didn't just fail to cover the spread. They looked absolutely terrible in ways that defied explanation and basic football logic. Josh Allen, the same quarterback who had thrown 6 touchdowns just 1 week earlier, suddenly couldn't complete a pass to save his life. The offensive play calling looked like it was designed by someone who had never watched football before. And the decisions being made on the field were so baffling, so inexplicably bad, that even casual fans were scratching their heads wondering what they were witnessing. Let's break down some of the most suspicious plays from this game, because when you see them laid out one after another, the pattern becomes impossible to ignore. First, there was the interception. Josh Allen throws a pass that gets tipped and picked off. Okay, that happens. Tipped passes are part of the game. Bad luck. Nothing to see here, right? Except when you watch how the game unfolded, when you see the pattern of decisions that followed, this interception starts to look less like bad luck and more like the first domino in a series of catastrophic failures. Then came the fourth and one play that has become the centerpiece of this entire controversy. Buffalo had the ball with 1 yard to go for a first down. 1 single yard. Josh Allen is one of the best short yardage quarterbacks in football. He's big, he's strong, he's mobile. Earlier in the same game, on another 4th and 1 situation, the Bills had simply let Allen run a quarterback sneak. He leaped over the line, got the first down, and it was almost unstoppable. The number 1 defense in football couldn't stop him from gaining 1 yard. So logically, with the game on the line and needing 1 yard, you'd run the same play again, right? Wrong. Instead, the Bills called one of the most bizarre plays you'll ever see. Look at the overhead view and watch what happens. Josh Allen is 1 yard from the first down marker. 1 yard. But instead of moving forward, instead of sneaking it, instead of doing literally anything that makes football sense, he runs backward. He runs 5 yards in the wrong direction to hand the ball off to running back James Cook, who promptly loses 2 more yards. They needed to gain 1 yard, and instead they lost 7 yards total because of this play call and execution. Even the announcers couldn't believe what they were watching. The fans in the stadium were stunned, and Josh Allen himself was caught on camera on the sideline asking his backup quarterback, "What are we doing?" He was frustrated, he was confused. He knew something was wrong with how that play was designed and executed. Now let's talk about the betting implications of all this, because that's where things get really dark. A representative from BetMGM, one of DraftKings' competitors, admitted before the game that the Texans covering the spread would be a good outcome for sportsbooks. Translation: the books were going to make a killing if Buffalo lost or failed to cover because so much money was on the Bills. And conveniently, that's exactly what happened. Bills wide receiver Khalil Shakir helped make that outcome a reality with one of the strangest fumbles you'll ever see. He caught the ball, had possession, and then just let it pop out. No massive hit, no strip by a defender. Just a fumble that seemed to come out of nowhere at the worst possible time for Buffalo and the best possible time for everyone who bet against them. But the most damning evidence, the play that has conspiracy theorists working overtime and even casual observers raising eyebrows, came on 4th and 6 with the game on the line. Buffalo needed 6 yards to keep their drive alive and potentially win the game. Josh Allen dropped back to pass and threw the ball to a receiver in the flat. A short pass that had no chance of getting the first down. The pass was incomplete. The Bills turned the ball over on downs, and the game was essentially over. But here's the thing that has everyone up in arms. When you go back and watch the film, when you look at the top of the screen on that play, tight end Dawson Knox was wide open. Not just a little bit open. Not just maybe if you squint, you could argue he had a step on his defender. Wide freaking open. No defenders within 10 yards of him. An easy throw for any NFL quarterback, let alone one as talented as Josh Allen. And if Allen hits Knox on that play, he very likely either scores a touchdown or gets down inside the 2-yard line with a high probability of winning the game. But Allen never even looked at him, never glanced in his direction. Threw the ball to a receiver who had no chance of converting instead of hitting the wide-open tight end who could have won the game. Sports analysts and frustrated fans have been pulling their hair out trying to understand how this happened. One analyst wrote, "This is infuriating. If Josh throws to Dawson Knox here, he very likely either scores or is down inside the 2-yard line with a high probability of winning." Another pointed out the obvious. Why is nobody talking about Josh Allen having 8 interceptions in the last 9 games? Something is clearly off with Allen's decision-making and performance. Even opposing players are starting to notice and comment. Tyrann Mathieu, a veteran NFL safety, gave his assessment of Allen's recent play. "I think Josh Allen, he's a great player. I think at times, man, he's just so reckless. He's always trying to make a play. Sometimes it results in negative plays. That's a diplomatic way of saying Allen is making terrible decisions that are costing his team games." But Mathieu's comments also highlight something important. This isn't a one-game problem. This isn't just an off night against the Texans. Allen has been throwing interceptions at an alarming rate for weeks now. His decision-making has been questionable. His performance has been inconsistent. And it all came to a head in this Thursday night game that just happened to have more money bet on it than almost any other regular season game this year. The conspiracy theorists have latched onto all of this evidence and run wild with their accusations. Social media is absolutely exploding with posts like this one. Imagine Josh Allen going for 6 touchdowns and believing a week later he can't even score one. It's fake. The NFL and its elite partners, FanDuel and DraftKings, win hundreds of millions like this. Not one touchdown after scoring 6. The NFL is rigged. These aren't fringe voices screaming into the void. These are regular fans, casual bettors, people who lost money on this game and are convinced they were scammed. They're pointing to the suspicious play calling. They're highlighting Allen's inexplicable decisions. They're noting how every major betting outlet pushed the Bills hard before the game, and they're connecting dots to create a narrative of intentional game fixing and fraud. Now let's pump the brakes for a second and talk about reality here, because while the evidence certainly looks damning when you lay it all out, we need to consider the alternative explanation. Is it more likely that Josh Allen, one of the highest paid and most visible players in the NFL, would risk his entire career, his reputation, his legacy, and potentially criminal prosecution to throw a game? Or is it more likely that he just had a really bad night, made some terrible decisions under pressure, and his coaches called some questionable plays at the worst possible time? The truth is that athletes have bad games all the time. Quarterbacks throw interceptions. Teams make baffling play calls. Coaches overthink situations and make decisions that look idiotic in hindsight. It happens every single week in the NFL. And while this particular game had some truly head-scratching moments, bad moments don't automatically equal conspiracy. Josh Allen doesn't seem like the kind of guy who would intentionally lose a football game. He's competitive, he's proud. He's got everything to lose and nothing to gain from throwing a game. The money he'd make from some illegal betting scheme would pale in comparison to what he stands to lose if he got caught, which in today's world of video review and social media scrutiny would be almost inevitable. But here's what we can't ignore. The perception is real. The anger is real. The suspicion is real. Millions of people lost money on this game, and they're convinced something fishy happened. Whether it's an actual conspiracy or just a perfect storm of bad football and unfortunate timing, the damage to the credibility of both the NFL and the sports betting industry is significant. When your customers, the people literally giving you money to bet on your product, start believing the games are rigged, you've got a massive problem on your hands. And let's talk about the role of DraftKings and the other sportsbooks in all of this. Because even if there was no actual conspiracy, their behavior before this game was problematic at best and predatory at worst. They knew how lopsided the betting was. They saw that 95% of the money was on Buffalo. And instead of trying to balance their books or move the line to attract more action on Houston, they actively encouraged more people to bet on the Bills. They promoted it. They marketed it. They created a narrative that made betting Buffalo seem like the only logical choice. And then when the Bills lost, the sportsbooks made an absolute fortune, while millions of bettors lost their shirts. That's not illegal, but it sure feels unethical. It feels like the house was setting up the public for a massive loss, whether intentionally or just by taking advantage of the betting patterns they were seeing. Sportsbooks have a responsibility to create fair betting markets. When they actively push one side of a bet that they know is overloaded, when they encourage more money to come in on a team that they suspect might not cover, they're essentially leading lambs to slaughter. And while caveat emptor, buyer beware, applies to gambling just like any other transaction, there's something particularly distasteful about a gambling company actively encouraging bets they know are likely to lose. The investigation that's reportedly underway will hopefully shed some light on what actually happened. Did Josh Allen have a legitimately bad game, or was something more sinister at play? Were the Bills' coaching decisions just incompetent, or were they intentionally sabotaging their own team? Did DraftKings and the other sportsbooks simply take advantage of public betting patterns? Or did they have knowledge that Buffalo was going to underperform and actively tried to maximize their profits? These are serious questions that deserve serious answers. But regardless of what any investigation finds, the damage is already done in many ways. The conspiracy theories are out there. The accusations are flying. The trust between bettors and sportsbooks has been damaged. And the NFL has another black eye to deal with in an era when the league is more closely tied to gambling than ever before. The partnership between professional sports leagues and betting companies was supposed to be mutually beneficial, bringing in new revenue streams and engaging fans in new ways. But when games start looking suspicious, when outcomes seem predetermined, when bettors feel like they've been scammed, that partnership becomes toxic. Here's my take on all of this, and I want to be crystal clear about where I stand. I don't have evidence that Josh Allen threw this game. I don't have proof that there was a conspiracy between the Bills and DraftKings. I don't even have a strong inclination to believe that any of this was intentional. Josh Allen doesn't seem like the kind of person who would risk everything to fix a football game. But what I do believe is that the way this game unfolded was deeply troubling. The decisions that were made on the field were inexplicable. The play calling was atrocious, and the timing of all these mistakes, coming when the betting public was more heavily invested in one outcome than almost any other game this season, is suspicious as hell. I also believe that DraftKings and the other sportsbooks acted irresponsibly in how they promoted this game. They saw the lopsided betting action, and instead of trying to protect their customers or create a more balanced market, they poured gasoline on the fire. They encouraged more people to bet Buffalo. They created a narrative that made it seem like free money. And then they collected millions when all those bets lost. That's legal, but it stinks. It feels wrong. And it's the kind of behavior that's going to erode trust in the entire sports betting industry if it continues. The bigger issue here is about trust and integrity in professional sports. Fans need to believe that what they're watching is real competition, not scripted entertainment. Bettors need to believe that the games are being played straight, not fixed for the benefit of gambling companies. Athletes need to be held to the highest standards of integrity because the moment we start doubting their effort or their intentions, the entire structure of professional sports collapses. We're not quite there yet, but games like this Thursday night disaster push us closer to that edge. What should happen next? First, there needs to be a thorough and transparent investigation into this game. The NFL needs to review the film, interview the coaches and players involved, and determine whether any rules were broken or any improper conduct occurred. If there was wrongdoing, it needs to be punished severely to send a message that game fixing will not be tolerated. If there wasn't any wrongdoing, if this was just a case of bad football, then the league needs to say that clearly and explain what happened to restore confidence. Second, the sports betting companies need to take a hard look at their promotional practices. There's nothing wrong with marketing your product, but there's something deeply problematic about actively encouraging bets that you know are likely to lose. Sportsbooks need to operate with more transparency and more responsibility, especially as they become more integrated with professional sports leagues. The days of the bookie in the back room are over. These are publicly traded companies with billions of dollars on the line. They need to act like it. Third, and this might be the most important point, fans and bettors need to remember that gambling is inherently risky. When everyone agrees on the same outcome, when a bet looks too good to be true, it probably is. The sportsbooks don't stay in business by losing money. They're very good at what they do, and they have access to information and analytics that the average bettor doesn't have. When you see 95% of the money on one side of a bet, that should be a red flag, not a sign to pile on. Smart bettors look for value, not consensus. They bet against the public, not with it. And they understand that in gambling, there are no sure things. The Buffalo Bills game against the Houston Texans will go down as one of the most controversial regular season games in recent NFL history. Whether it was a legitimate game that just went wrong in spectacular fashion or an actual conspiracy to defraud bettors, we may never know for certain. But what we do know is that millions of people lost money, trust was damaged, and serious questions were raised about the integrity of both professional football and the sports betting industry. Those questions need to be answered, that trust needs to be restored, and everyone involved needs to do better to ensure this kind of controversy doesn't happen again.